lead up to Ruin's release, one of the major questions was which of Security Breach's 6 endings the DLC would follow. And when the game did finally come out, most people decided Ruin implied that the 3-star Princess Quest ending, where Glitchtrap is destroyed and Vanessa is freed from his control, was the canon ending. However, while there are indications of this having possibly taken place, it's not quite that simple. From Ruined Freddy being labeled a prototype, to the files for the Switch port of Security Breach labeling the Burntrap ending as the true ending, to Gregory somehow having knowledge of the other endings, there are various aspects of the game that imply there's something more going on here. And given franchise creator Scott Cawthon has stated he doesn't retcon things at will, I think it would be hasty to use retcons as an excuse without trying to find another explanation. So what really happened at the end of Security Breach, and what does that mean for the story and characters we see in Ruin? Well, sit back and consider subscribing, because there is a lot more to the true story of this game than we may have realized. When looking at Ruin, it's no surprise that the Princess Quest ending is the one that the community decided was canon, and I am not going to argue with the fact that there is a lot going for it having happened. In the AR world, the Princess Quest 3 arcade has the princess's sword sticking out of it to potentially imply the game's been beaten and Glitchtrap's been defeated. In the Princess Quest ending, Gregory and Vanessa leave the Pizzaplex with Freddy's head, and in Blast, a headless Freddy is present with damages to his torso that look pretty dang similar to the ones we see he's sustained in that ending when Vanny ordered the staff bots to disassemble him. On top of that, in Ruin, you can find comic drawings that the protagonist, Cassie, identifies as being made by Gregory, each of one of Security Breach's endings except for, you guessed it, the Princess Quest one. Throw in the fact that Vanny doesn't make an appearance outside of a brief recording we see in the AR world, and how the Princess Quest ending is one of the few endings where Vanny's no longer a problem, and altogether that makes a pretty solid case for the Princess Quest ending being the one that really happened. Or at least it would, if not for FNAF doing what it does best and poking holes in what on the surface looks like an open and shut case to make it more confusing than what we want it to be. Speaking of things that are more confusing than they should be, have you ever struggled with finding time in your schedule to go grocery shopping, or been too busy to actually make a meal that'll get you through your day? If so, you should check out the sponsor of this video, Factor. With a variety of ready-made meals delivered fresh, never frozen, right to your door, there's no need to worry about grocery shopping or time constraints. As a college student working 2 jobs, that's been a concern for me for quite a while, but now with Factor, all I have to do is take out one of the pre-prepared meals, punch some holes in the plastic, and pop it in the microwave for 2 minutes, and I'm good to go. And I gotta say, I'm not usually the biggest fan of broccoli or mushrooms, but the way Factor prepared them for the cheesy bacon ranch shredded chicken meal I had was amazing. Fortunately, if one meal plan isn't to your taste, there are a variety of options like keto, calorie smart, chef's choice, and vegan options, so you can easily customize your meal plan to your specific needs. So if any of that sounds good to you, all you need to do is head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code IDFantasy50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. That's IDFANTASY50 to get 50% off your first Factor box at factor75.com or the link in the description, so make sure to check them out. But back to the topic at hand, there are unfortunately a few things that don't line up perfectly if the Princess Quest ending is the one true ending. Take Vanny for instance. While at first it seems like her lack of presence in Ruin means that she must have been freed from Glitchtrap's control, there's evidence that she might still be around, or at least was still around for some time after Security Breach. After all, someone had to put up the new Vanny graffiti and modify Mapbot and the mini Music Men to have rabbit ears, and while it could have just been some no-name character who showed up between the main game and the DLC, these all feel like things Vanny would do. We know she's the type to do graffiti, and it would be strange if some random person decided to modify the mini Music Men to have rabbit ears of all things if they didn't already have that rabbit association. In Vanny's hideout, we see the Princess Quest arcade cabinet on its side with a lantern resting on it in the real world and a sword stabbed into it in AR. And while this could indicate that the game was beaten, it could just as easily be implying the princess's defeat, as not only is a lantern sitting on the ground used as the game over screen of the game, but the sword is stabbed into where the side art of the princess was, while the glitch rabbit from the original Princess Quest is visible on the wall above the game. While this could still symbolize Glitchtrap's defeat, it could just as easily be interpreted as the princess's, with the sword and lantern dropped to the ground and the princess run through, with Glitchtrap escaping. As such, Vanny could still be around, just not physically present as there's nothing left at the Pizzaplex for her to do. I'm not saying this is the case, but I am saying that we should be careful to make assumptions about things being confirmed based on our interpretations of things, such as the sword in the Princess Quest arcade cabinet. However, there are of course other things at play here besides Vanny and Princess Quest, namely the whole headless Freddy and Gregory drawing Burntrap ending things, both of which are pretty solid evidence for Princess Quest having happened. After all, we literally see a headless Freddy just like we do in the Princess Quest ending, and if all the endings Gregory draws are fake, that should be enough on its own to prove that the Burntrap ending didn't happen and Princess Quest did, right? Well, not exactly. especially in terms of Freddy. While yes, this is a headless Freddy model, and Gregory takes Freddy's head with him in the Princess Quest ending, leaving behind Freddy's body in FazFriends, there are actually some pretty solid clues that not only is this not our Freddy from Security Breach, but that this Freddy is actually important to the backstory of one decommissioned Glamrock Bonnie. One of the first things we see upon stumbling into Freddy in Ruin, aside from the fact that he's damaged and collapsed, is that this Freddy has the word prototype on his foot, which raises some pretty major flags due to Gregory's Freddy very much not having that. On top of this, his color is more faded and the lightning bolt on his chest is thinner. Not to mention this Freddy still has a present box in his stomach hatch, while our Freddy gave his present containing the Fazwatch to Gregory early on in Security Breach. However, some people have raised the point that the animatronics have had their designs altered between the main game and the DLC, such as Roxy having the new facial attachment for Cassie's Faz wrench to fit into, and Monty having his teeth changed. And these are perfectly valid points to bring up. The thing is, I don't think this is a case of Steel Wool arbitrarily deciding to change things between games. After all, there's some rather interesting evidence that in between Security Breach and Ruin, technicians or mechanics have been in the Pizzaplex working on the animatronics. For one, there's the fact that Cassie can find a Faz wrench, and that the Faz wrench can now fit into Roxy's face in the back of the daycare attendant's head, when in the base game that wouldn't have been possible, is already pretty interesting. But the reason I don't write this off as a convenience change to accommodate a new mechanic is because in FazFriends, shortly before running into Prototype Freddy, we can find a table containing tools and parts that, while not for fixing an animatronic, is something new that was brought in after Security Breach, meaning that between games, technicians or mechanics or some other personnel along similar lines have been in the building working on repairing things, likely including the animatronics. It's not like the animatronics are active all the time, as we see Chica inactive before she reactivates, so there would have been some time for the technicians to do their thing before the animatronics probably came back online and presumably got rid of them. On top of this, we know from Tales from the Pizzaplex that scrapped older versions of the Glamrock animatronics do exist, as in the Bobby Dot's conclusion, the main character finds the broken remains of a somewhat active Glamrock Chica in the Pizzaplex's sewers, where it's mentioned that a whole bunch of endos and broken animatronics are kept. With that in mind, not only do the modified animatronics make sense, but it also makes sense why there would be a Prototype Freddy in FazFriends from a logistical standpoint. If the full Freddy did in fact leave the Pizzaplex with Gregory, why not bring out the old Prototype Freddy with his slightly different paint job and Fazwatch gift box to his portion of the Pizzaplex and try to repair him so that they wouldn't have to completely replace the character, as based on the condition of the place, Fazbear would probably be trying to cut replacement costs wherever it could. However, while that explains how Prototype would have ended up in FazFriends, this doesn't address, the massive damage to Freddy's torso that's pretty reminiscent of the damage done when Vanny tells the staff boss to disassemble Freddy, or why Scott and Steel Wool would bother including a prototype version of Freddy in the game at all. Fortunately, I have a possible answer for both of these concerns, and the answer lies with Glamrock Bonnie and the Tales from the Pizzaplex books. There were quite a few interesting things in the Tales story, The Storyteller, but while most of the attention for that story has gone to the Mimic 1 program, there are a few other interesting things that are important to note. First, that this is pretty early in the Pizzaplex's existence, given at this point, Glamrock Chica is yellow instead of white. Second, it wasn't until the Storyteller was installed that Monty got his trademark destructive aggression. And third, by this point, there's already no Glamrock Bonnie to be seen. The only animatronics present in the Storyteller are Roxy, Freddy, Monty, and Chica, meaning that before the Mimic 1 program made Monty destructive and influenced the other Glamrock animatronics, Glamrock Bonnie had already been decommissioned. With Bonnie able to be found in the Ruin DLC and the Gator Golf gondola ride showing the corporate reason for Bonnie's replacement with Monty, it definitely seems like attention was being intentionally drawn to him and his backstory. And while people point to the green coloration around the tears in Bonnie's torso, the note from Security Breach about Bonnie disappearing after going into Monty's Gator Golf, and how at the end of the Gator gondola ride, there's a Bonnie cutout at the top of the tornado, all as indicating Monty being the one to decommission Bonnie, Monty not only wasn't as aggressive at that point in time, but he didn't have the claws he would have needed to claw open Bonnie's torso, since he didn't get those upgrades until after he was brought in to replace Bonnie as the band's bass player. And even if he had tried to claw open Bonnie, the green coloration around the slashes isn't just along the gouges as they would be if Monty had dug his fingers in deep enough to reach the green parts of his fingers and scratch off that paint. It's all over the place. On top of this, Monty decommissioning Bonnie actually doesn't line up with his behavior as hinted in the duffel bag messages in Security Breach. Based on how in the final level of Monty Golf, Monty is playing on stage with Chica and Roxy while Freddy's in a dumpster, most of us assumed that Monty wanted to be lead band member, destroying Bonnie to take his place, and that this Monty Golf level represented his desire to take out Freddy and lead the band himself. However, the message Monty Mischief states that Monty was skipping performances to wander the catwalks where he had previously been damaged by the Hurricane Hole-in-One bucket, just like we see happened to him thanks to Gregory in Security Breach. If Monty got rid of Bonnie because he wanted to be in the band and now wants to take Freddy's place, why would he skip performances and risk being damaged? Well, I think it's because it wasn't Monty who decommissioned Bonnie, it was Prototype Freddy. I realize that probably sounds crazy, but when you look at the evidence, things really start to stack up. Monty didn't get claws until after Bonnie was gone, but Prototype Freddy has them. Monty is shown to want to be in the band without Freddy, but skips out on performances, which would make sense if Bonnie wasn't destroyed out of Monty's jealousy and desire to perform, but rather because of Monty seeing what Prototype Freddy did to Bonnie in his territory. On top of all this, if you take a closer look at the Monty Golf Gondola ride, where the Bonnie cutout is found at the end of the tornado, you'll notice that while Monty is at the tornado's base, to the left there's a broken Freddy statue that seems a bit out of place to randomly include at the end of Monty's backstory, and is broken in a very interesting way. This Freddy statue is decapitated, with its head not on the ground like it would have been if it had fallen off from the damage due to the quote-unquote earthquake that wrecked the Pizzaplex, but rather looking as though it's in the process of being torn off by the tornado, or rather perhaps the hurricane that Monty is shown at the base of. The end scene of the gondola ride is part of the Fazbear excuse for Bonnie's disappearance, but I think that through the environmental storytelling, Steel Wool is also telling us the true story of what happened to Glamrock Bonnie. Bonnie was in Monty's Gator Golf for whatever reason that certainly seems to be significant if the situation with the probably possessed wet floor bots and himself are any indication, and Prototype Freddy attacked Bonnie, presumably with some force that wanted Bonnie stopped, taking control, with Freddy easily getting the upper hand as Bonnie couldn't have expected an attack like that from someone he was so close with. The hurricane bucket was triggered, likely by Monty due to the hour of night Bonnie disappeared, trying to stop the fight. But while it did successfully stop them, it severely damaged Freddy, and Bonnie was nowhere to be found, dragged off to be hidden in Bonnie Bowl as we eventually find in Ruin. Of course, Monty doesn't know this, and even after he's brought in to be Bonnie's replacement in the band, he desperately searches for Bonnie from the catwalks he fell from, skipping practice in the hope that he'd be able to find Bonnie from up there. Meanwhile, Prototype Freddy was also badly damaged, and as he was a prototype, Fazbear Entertainment decided to upgrade to a newer model, transferring his character memory and personality chip to the Glamrock Freddy we meet in Security Breach. With this as a possibility, I think we're shown Prototype Freddy in Ruin not to retcon in a new explanation for things we already had reasons for in Security Breach for Freddy, but to hint at the true story behind Bonnie's disappearance. That's why this Freddy's missing his head, why he still has the Fazwatch box, why he has claws. That's why this Freddy doesn't exist in the AR world. He had his mind and memory removed and installed to our Glamrock Freddy, who's no longer present. Him being headless can understandably lead to the assumption that this is our Freddy after a Princess Quest ending, but Steel Wool made sure the first thing we saw of this Freddy was the giant text across his foot saying Prototype, and I don't think that's a coincidence. However, this does not debunk whether or not the Princess Quest ending is canon, and the fact that the one ending Gregory does not draw is the Princess Quest one is a pretty big deal. All the Glamrocks in Ruin may be missing their upgrades from Security Breach, and the files for the Switch port of Security Breach may call the Burntrap ending the true ending, as does the title of the soundtrack song that doesn't play during the Princess Quest ending but does during the Burntrap one, but it wouldn't make much sense for Gregory to have drawn one ending that he did experiment, as well as a bunch of endings he didn't, and then have him just not draw anything from the Princess Quest ending. Either the Princess Quest ending happened but the others didn't, or all of the other 5 endings somehow all happened but Princess Quest didn't. Retconning the canonicity of the Burntrap ending could be said to make more sense than having 5 contradictory endings all take place, right? Well, it would, if not for one important detail. Gregory used to be Patient 46. There isn't really any other way to interpret the Tales from the Pizzaplex story GGY, which means that at one point, a point which might not have fully ended, Gregory had Glitchtrap in his head. Chances are extremely high that he had something similar to what Vanny and Cassie had going on, with Vanny's mind being trapped in FNAF VR, able to hear herself speak but unable to act in reality, and Cassie with a chip from the Vanny mask implanted that not only altered her perceptions in the AR world, but also in the real world. After all, that chip is in her head constantly, and Helby can show up in her vision whenever he wants. Putting on a mask that makes things look different doesn't suddenly create portals or turn real-world walls into empty spaces. The only way for all that to be possible is for those to actually be empty spaces in the real world that the chip makes Cassie think are walls. The AR world may show more of her subconscious and memories, what with Gregory's missing posters and the cutouts of Cassie's backstory that show up, but that doesn't mean that everything in the real world is in fact real, even if most of it is. And the thing is, we see this at play with Gregory in main game Security Breach. Somehow, when Freddy has Roxy's eyes, he's able to find formerly invisible discs containing Gregory and Vanessa's therapy sessions that, theoretically, only Gregory would be aware of. Gregory is able to flash a camera at a wall to reveal a door to a room that doesn't make sense to have been built in the Pizzaplex, with code writing on the wall that seems to pertain specifically to Gregory. There are plushies of Nightmarione, a character that that's never had a canon physical manifestation hidden in random places, and Nightmare-owned painted staff bots can be found that have "in your dreams" painted across their chests. All of this could imply that not everything Gregory's seeing is real. One of the biggest themes in Tales from the Pizzaplex is characters struggling to escape a false reality for the true one. In Under Construction, a girl uses a broken AR booth at the Pizzaplex, but while she thinks she wakes up from the experience, she eventually discovers that she's still trapped in it, as everyone around her is getting sick with cancer and every baby born is a jelly blob. In Drowning, a girl ends up trapped in a VR simulation of a water park that's empty except for a girl attacking her who reminds her of her cousin who she wasn't able to stop from ending up in a coma. In Tiger Rock, a boy thinks he's living his life normally after escaping from the virtual reality Tiger Rock animatronic, but in reality is still in VR, only realizing after noticing that things aren't lining up with the real world the way they should. Time and time again, people are trapped in VR or AR, and most of the time they don't even realize it. I think that's what happened to Cassie in Ruin, with her perceiving things that aren't actually there, and I think the same could be true of Gregory. If Gregory was having his mind and experiences controlled by an outside force, it wouldn't be too far-fetched if he thought he was experiencing each ending, only to then wake up back where he started, inside Freddy, who could easily have his mind tampered with in turn, or just at one of his conveniently Helpy-themed save points. We do hear in Security Breach that the Pizzaplex is being closed for a few days for scheduled maintenance, so that would give time for each run-through of Gregory's to happen, even if his perception of time wasn't being distorted like the characters in the Tales books. Throw in the fact that we know for a fact that not everything Gregory drew is fake, as we see the blob in Ruin, and I think it's entirely possible that Gregory did draw each of these comics from things he remembers having seen, but may not have actually taken place. That's not to say there isn't anything of major lore relevance in these endings. I think they were still all put there by Steel Wool to reveal something about the world and the characters, and are all things that could have actually happened. However, I think that the only one that did happen, and the one that finally broke Gregory free from the false reality, was the true ending, the Burntrap ending. In Ruin, Helpy says that he won't be able to reach Cassie while she's in the sinkhole under Roxy Raceway where we find the Mimic. And while this may or may not actually be true given the Brazil ending, Cassie can't use the mask for the most part, implying that there is some truth to it. And as this would be where Gregory is during the Burntrap ending, he likely couldn't be reached by whatever was manipulating him either. We find out in Ruin that the blob caused an earthquake by tunneling under the Pizzaplex, and the only ending where it's active is in the Burntrap ending, where it grabs Burntrap and presumably leaves. It's also implied in Ruin that Gregory is still underground, as his attempts to contact Cassie are less static-filled and more successful underground, and he uses the phrase "down here" rather than "down there" to describe Cassie's location in the old Freddy's Pizzeria. If Gregory went and did the Burntrap ending after experiencing the others, that would account for his implied location, the activity of the blob, the disappearance of Burntrap, Prototype Freddy instead of our Glamrock Freddy, and why Gregory would draw things we know exist like the blob. Do I think this theory means none of Security Breach mattered or happened in the real world? No. I think Gregory's actions impacted the world around him plenty. Things just may have been altered or changed between each of his experiences by whoever was manipulating him. Am I absolutely settled on this theory? Of course not. There is a lot of information we just don't have, and it's entirely possible there's something I overlooked. Honestly, I am also partial to the theory that elements of the Princess Quest ending and the Burntrap ending both happened. But do I think that this is a possibility that shouldn't be overlooked? Yes. I will say I find it very ironic that if this theory is the case, and Gregory did draw each of the comics for the endings he actually experienced, that would mean not only that the Princess Quest ending is the only ending that didn't end up happening, but that Gregory did in fact experience Five Nights at Freddy's rather than the one we thought he did. But hey, if you think something different, that's absolutely fine. I know I haven't fully settled on what I believe is going on, and honestly it'll probably take until the current story arc finishes for that to finally happen. With all that said, I would really appreciate it if you shared this video, if not because you agree, then to get other people thinking about things in a different way. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, don't get stabbed, and have a nice day.